Shalom, and welcome to the Parasha Pod. I'm Rav Mordechai Rosenberg, here with Rav Menachem Leibtag, and we are talking Torah together.
Starting Sefer Shemot and Parasha Shemot.
Very good. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, it's time to learn. So Rav Leibtag, looking forward to an exciting new book. We did the whole Sefer Parasha together, which was very exciting, thrilling, and Sefer Shemot is starting now. So, Book of Exodus. And I have to say, when I start Sefer Shemot, I've got a bit of a sense of impending doom, foreboding. Because
you read the book already.
Yeah, I feel like this is going into a pretty dark place pretty quickly. It's almost like, I wonder whether Jewish people around the world, but with rising anti-Semitism, feel a sense of a little bit of foreboding as well. Some Jewish people think, that the sort of eventual terrible outcome is necessarily going to happen at some point. And some people are optimistic, or they think, it doesn't have to be that way. We could turn things around. And I'm just thinking about this scenario in the beginning of Sefer Shemot. We know it eventually does end up in the enslavement of the Jewish people and, throwing all the firstborn sons, all the boys in the sea, in the river. But did it have to go that way? I mean, is that sense of foreboding in the book of Exodus justified?
So I'll add to your question. At the Seder, I call it the Chutzpadik son, because at the Seder we thank God for taking us out of Egypt, and we thank God, you fulfilled your promise of Brit Bein Abtarim that you would, redeem us with great wealth and punish our oppressor, etc. But in the same covenant, God also promised to put us there.
Right.
Yeah. In other words, so why are we thanking Him for saving us? You put us there.
Right. In other words, you can reframe this whole question as, well, it all goes back to the Brit Bein Abtarim, where God promised that we would be enslaved in Egypt. So this has all been foretold.
So you weren't the first person to ask the question. Nor was I.
Right.
The Rambam in Hilchot Shuvah in chapter 5, I think, chapter 5 and 6, he talks about freedom of choice, Bechira Chofshi. And he asked the question, why is Pharaoh being punished for enslaving us? God said it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then he says later on, why is God angry in the time period of the Shoftim for us following idol worship? He told Moshe Rabbeinu in Parasha Ve'elech, it's going to happen. You're going to come to the land, you're going to sin, you're going to follow gods, and I have to punish you, etc.
Yeah.
So, and we're dealing with the core question about prophecy, which is your thing. Is prophecy about what will happen, what's bound to happen, or what might happen? In other words, when Chumash tells us these stories, are we learning them to find out what did happen in the past, what will happen in the future, or what can happen in the future? So I'll give you an example. The Rambam's answer to that question was not that it will be this specific Pharaoh. It's bound to happen. He's saying, I want you to become a nation. Unlike other nations, you're not going to begin with the land. You're going to begin in someone else's land. You're going to be strangers in someone else's land. You're going to be migrants. You're going to be mistreated, because that always happens. Migrants are always mistreated by existing powers. And when you become a nation, you need to remember your early stages that you went through suffering. Remember, you talked the story of Exodus or the book of redemption. Chazal called it the book of Geulah. Is it the story of how we are redeemed from our slavery? Or is it a question about how we redeem our slavery? Meaning, do I need to know that we got stuck and God came and saved us and thank God for it? Or do we need to know, what did we learn from that story? So I can take our suffering and redeem it.
Right. Now, in other words, to find meaning in that suffering and that the suffering has a positive purpose. Meaning.
In other words, later on when we receive the Torah at Mount Sinai, the opening line is, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm your God, or I'm your boss. Asher hotzitecha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. I took you out of Egypt from the house of slavery. You needed to go through slavery and oppression. I see it as basic training to become God's nation. Now, all through Chumash, God says, if you follow my laws, right, then I'll bless you. If you don't, you're going to go back. I have to make you suffer again. I can learn from my suffering and grow from it. I think the best example is in the laws of Parashat Mishpatim. There's a whole set of laws about judicial laws, about a judicial system, and make sure there's justice, and also about kindness. And one of the final lines in chapter 23, verse 9 in Sefer Shemot, it says, "V'ger lo tuchatz," don't oppress a stranger. "V'atem yidatem et nefesh hager," You know what it feels like to be a stranger in Egypt. You were strangers in Egypt. In other words, remember how you suffered, how you were mistreated. Redeem that suffering by making sure you don't do that to others. I can take any negative experience and grow from it. We call it post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
Now, you can have questions on God. That's a different topic. That's Sefer Eov maybe. But now that it happened, what do I learn? How did that story affect my Judaism today? Yes, and what's it mean today? So does that story tell us that, God saved me in the past, and if I pray to him, he'll save me again? Whenever I'm in trouble, I have a God to go to, I just have to pray? Or does that story teach me, what do I do in Jewish history when we go through suffering? How do I redeem our suffering and use it as an educational message to act better? And then God promises, if I internalize that message and become this nation that's known for its kindness and benevolence and learns from its suffering and make sure not to do that to others, that will bring blessing and that will give us peace and quiet. Now, it's not that this has to happen. It might happen if we don't learn our lesson. Now, the question is how to apply that. I'm not getting how to apply that in modern day times, but you can't miss that theme all through Chumash, that remember you were a slave in Egypt, which always affects our behavior. Even the 10 Commandments in Sefer Devarim, when it comes to the reason for Shabbat, you need to give your workers a day of rest, and therefore you must rest one day a week, so your workers have the day of rest.
Wow,
that's just remember correction.
Shabbat is for the individual is actually just a secondary point in that, according to that reason.
Yeah, in Shemot, it's to remember that God created, and he gave you creativity to use it properly, and to use it to do good. But in Devarim, it's in order that you give your workers a day of rest.
Yeah.
Remember, you were a slave in Egypt. And all through Devarim, numerous times, they'll say, when you're harvesting your field, leave over what's called shicha, leave over for the poor, pretend to leave over. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt. When you're freeing, say, a slave after 7 years, give them a bonus. Remember, you were a slave in Egypt. Be kind to the stranger. You have to love the stranger because you were strangers in Egypt. And that's how God takes care of the stranger, by giving you the ability. So Chumash is redeeming our suffering and using it as an educational tool to remember how we have to behave. And then Chumash says, in all the Tochachot, do a good job of serving me as a people, act in a way that sanctifies God, and I'll bless you. If you're obnoxious and haughty and don't build a just society, I'll bring some type of punishment upon you, and you have to learn the hard way.
In other words, if we don't learn the lesson from the first batch of suffering, then we might get another batch of suffering.
Just read the Tochachot. They just said over again.
Right.
We say every day in Shema, don't we?
It's like we need to go. It's like school is suffering, and if we don't learn the lesson in school, we have to go back to school.
Yeah, or the lesson of history we don't learn from our history.
And we have to go back to history.
Right. Now again, how to apply that? That's already ask your local rabbi or ask your local navi.
All right. So in a sense, the sense of foreboding is justified because that suffering is required in order to learn these essential lessons that we're going to need to carry with us throughout the rest of our history. But on the other hand, theoretically, we could have got the message
an easier way.
So
Ramban explains that Pharaoh, it wouldn't have been one Pharaoh, but another. It was bound to happen. If it would be this Pharaoh, it would be a different Pharaoh. The second you're migrant, someone's going to take advantage of you. Other Pashanim, who sort of go in a bit of a different direction, was Pharaoh was given the right to do it, he overdid it. So Pharaoh is being punished for overdoing it. Now, the bigger question comes up, who's to blame for our slavery? So you could read it that we're doing everything fine, we're wonderful, and this terrible Egyptian people are just mean for no reason and just take advantage, enslave us. Or you can be like a self-hating Jew and say, we're to blame for it. Why? And that's another direction in Parshanim. We got involved in their economy, remember?
Right.
Remember, who's Yaakov Melech Hadash? Who's this new king? Is that a new regime? Because there's many dynasties in Egypt. Right. The old dynasty, the old Pharaoh, who Pharaoh and Yosef were working together all the time. In fact, Yosef and his family gave Pharaoh the ability to take over the whole country of Egypt. So there might have been a rebellion because Pharaoh took up all their land and all their freedom and moved them from place to place. That was the story we had in the end of Vayigash. Maybe that caused the uprising. And then when the new regime comes in, they're punishing all the people who supported the previous regime. Things like that happen all the time, in case you did not following the news. So are we partially to blame, for that starting, or it had to happen and we have to suffer? It's called dual causality. Had brothers not sold Yosef, some people say Brit Ben Abtim could have been fulfilled with 4 generations with Yaakov by Lavan. Because Yaakov's children is the 4th generation. We went through suffering. Yaakov went through suffering by Lavan. He was mistreated. He leaves with great wealth. God punishes the oppressor. In a very simple manner, Brit Ben Abtim could have been fulfilled with Yaakov. But maybe because we sold our brother and what we did in Shechem, maybe that caused it. Again, there's all different opinions of what happens.
That gives a whole new layer to that Arami Oved Avi line in the Haggadah. That if you want to blame Lavan for being worse than Pharaoh, well, he could have been an alternative to Pharaoh in a way.
Yeah, I think pretty much. I'm pretty sure Rashbam brings that possibility that it could have been. I mean, I know some Parshanim say that had Yaakov not bowed down to Esav, had he stood up and been a man, that wouldn't happen. We did something wrong. It could have been with the Lavan, but we did something wrong. So some people say, what did we do wrong? We weren't right-wing enough. We weren't strong enough. We bowed down to Esav, and therefore we have to go through suffering again. You have to come up, strong. That's so-called the right-wing approach. The left-wing approach is because what we did to Shechem and how we massacred the whole city and why we sold our brother, it was because we weren't kind enough. You follow?
Right.
So each group can take their can take that framework and apply it to their own hashkafa. Are we able to look at openly from both sides and entertain both possibilities?
Interesting.
So we can always learn. Again, you say Chumash is redeeming our history all the time. So you'll never know for sure, but Chumash always leaves you open to considering what's called dual causality. There's a dual cause for it. I noticed something really interesting. In the laws of Shmita in Parshat Bechukotai, and Parsha Bahar, which I guess we'll do in a couple of months, there's laws, having land rest every 7 years, followed by, should a fellow Jew lose his property, have to sell his property because he's in debt? He has to mortgage his property. It's our duty to help him buy his land back so he can make a living again. If he's so poor he has to sell himself into slavery, we have to redeem him from slavery so he can be independent again.
Right.
Okay? And then ending with Kili b'nei Sravadim, Asher Tzeitam Mitzrayim, is we have to be Goel. We have to do Geula. The Chumash uses the word Geula there more than anywhere else. You have to be a Goel. You have to redeem your fellow Jew for one of 2 reasons. Either because he's so poor he had to sell his field, or he's so poor he had to sell himself.
Right.
Followed by, because you're serving me, and that's why I took you out of Egypt.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember, in Parsha Vayigash, what happened? The Pharaoh took advantage of the famine and of the excess that they saved,
which was 7 years.
Yeah, and then they sold it, but at a price where people had to sell everything. First, they sold all their land to Pharaoh, and then they had to sell themselves to Pharaoh. All those stages that happened to Egypt, we have to make sure not to do that to within ourselves.
Right.
That was what happened to Egypt, where Pharaoh brought up all Egypt because of people's terrible financial situation. Instead of taking advantage of that, go out your way to help them. Keep their land, keep their freedom. That's the laws of Yovel right there, to make sure everyone has to have a right to a piece of land, to be free, and but be aware of people less fortunate.
Interesting. So that definitely is a support for that side that is critical of Yosef's policy.
Yeah, that could be. Now, that's the question, why is that story there? So that would explain why the story is there.
Right.
Or maybe that's just what happened. So again, Chumash doesn't give you the bottom line. It gives you enough information that you can... Now, the question is it possible to read into it without a bias?
Right.
That's always the question. Do we begin with our outlook on life and then read into what we want? Or can we be open and try to study and try to understand what message we can derive from it?
Yeah, that is a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Whatever the answer was back then, either way, I can be machmir on ourselves nowadays. The idea that we have to be kind and nice and make sure people have freedom and have their own land, have their own freedom to be good people. That's what do we do with our wealth? And always being kind and sensitive, that's got to be a Jewish trait.
Yeah.
Now, how to apply that in difficult political situations, that's much more complicated.
Yeah, I see. All right, so the second part of this is that on the one hand, we the suffering wasn't necessarily going to be that bad, but Pharaoh is still responsible for his part in it. But on the other hand, we're also responsible, maybe in a way.
It doesn't say avodat parech in Brit Ben Abtarim.
Right.
It's way worse. It's way worse than it needed to be.
Right. So, and that part maybe...
a lot of Parashim talk about that.
The Yosef's policy was maybe a contributing factor to
that could be, or maybe Pharaoh was extra.
Right.
Zechariah says the same thing in the beginning of Beit Sheni. God says, I'm angry with the nations. I gave them the right to punish you. They overdid it. So I'm going to punish them and come and redeem you. I gave the Babylonians the right to exile you, and they overdid it.
Right.
So now I'm going to overdo your redemption and help you out more than you deserve. That was Zechariah back in the beginning of Beit Sheni.
So can I just extract something from what you've been saying and deal with a specific point, which is that question about, the what you call the Chutzpadik son, the idea of like, on Seder night, we're thanking God so much for taking us out of Egypt, but he was the one that put us in there. And, as we say also, like there's lots of moments in this parasha where we value the idea, Vayeda Elokim, God knew, and God says, I've seen the suffering of the Jewish people.
Yeah, at the end of chapter 2, we have all 4 verbs. God heard our cry. God saw our suffering.
Right.
God knows. Right? And then God comes down and God remembers his breath.
Right.
He gears all the same things we had in the story of Stone.
Right.
That can Bereshit.
So the answer to that Chutzpadik son, which I admit his question has occurred to me, so maybe that's me, is well, God is, yes, he is the one causing us to suffer, but it's for a purpose. Maybe there was a part of it that we were also contributed to.
It's like someone does basic training in the army, or someone becoming a doctor has to go through a residency. They call it stage.
Right.
So that's necessary suffering to get your job done.
Right.
In basic training, you don't make the soldier suffer for the sake of suffering.
Right.
You learn to know how to act under battle conditions and how to survive. Same thing with a doctor. So if I don't suffer through training, I won't become who I am.
Right.
That's what's called an Isayon.
And so when God sort of remembers us and sees our suffering, it's like, all right, he's deciding we've been through enough and we've suffered enough to know the value of
or
helping
we suffered so much it's we have to save you. Maybe it's not working, but it's I got to take him out no matter what. That's what Chazal say.
Right.
We were with the 40th level of Tuman. God said, I got to take him out sooner than I thought.
Right.
Because it was too rough on them.
Nice. Okay. All right. Beautiful. Next, I'd like to talk a bit about Moshe and the burning bush and Moshe's reaction. So, first of all, I love the burning bush scene. What a classic, image. Great thing to portray as a piece of artwork. Very, very majestic. But why a burning bush specifically? It's something that we've never really seen before or since. We don't really talk about a snare, a thorn bush that much, so far as I know. And the next thing is, when Moshe does hear from God at the burning bush, he's so reluctant to take this job. I mean, he is like desperate for any other job.
You'd expect a great leader to be, to
be charismatic,
and
be able to be willing at least to step up to the plate, not to be dragged kicking and screaming to the job. For instance, seems to me that King David, for instance, is a lot more willing to step up to the job. What do you have to say?
A lot.
Okay.
and usually in Hollywood, it's Moshe's torn between his family and his people, the torn kind of thing, or he's reluctant, leave me alone. I got my life now in Midian. I read it very differently. I'll try to explain why. But your opening question about the sneh, so there's got to be a connection between the word sneh in Hebrew and Sinai.
Okay.
The question, what came first? Is it called Sinai because of the sneh?
Is he saying that Sinai might have been the place of the sneh, or maybe it was just covered in thorn bushes?
And also, it's called Chorev, which was dry. Later, we're going to hit water there. So it's an idea being, Moshe's watching, becoming a shepherd. Later, God, shepherds his people. We're like God's we have all that analogy.
Right.
We need a shepherd who understands how to lead his flocks can become a shepherd for his people.
Right.
That we have that analogy all through the Nevi'im. The Ro'im, the political leaders are called Ro'im. They're like shepherds to the people.
Right. So Moshe needs the chance to.
So first of all, the Har Sinai imagery you can't miss when you read Sefer Devarim. After the what we call the Ten Commandments or the Dibrot, the people get extremely scared by the whole theophany, and they come to Moshe and says, if we another minute here at Har Sinai, we're going to die. And they say, Ki micho basar asher shema kol Elohim chaim medaber mitoch ha'esh k'moni v'yechi.
Sorry, where are you reading from exactly?
Devarim chapter 5, verse 21, 22, 23.
Okay.
As I say, we saw God speaking mitoch ha'esh from the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're believers. Lama namut ki tochlenu esh hagdola azot. Anymore, we can't survive. We're going to die if we spend another minute in Har Sinai from this great fire. Okay, because what mortal could possibly hear the voice of God from this fire and survive? Moshe, you can handle it. Moshe, you can handle a burning bush. You can handle. You're mortal, but you can survive the fire. We can't. Therefore, you're the middleman.
Yeah.
And God says, great idea. So the idea of something organic being consumed by fire but not being consumed, I think relates to the idea, how can you become close to God? How can you encounter God and stay alive? So there's a lot of imagery that later in the temple. It's how can we come into the Holy of Holies without protection?
Right.
That's already a topic in the imagery of what happens in the Mishkan and the Korbanot. But I think the coming to the sneh, which later is going to be a place where we receive the Torah and enter a covenant, that has to be meaningful. Now, the bigger question is, why is Moshe so reluctant? So, number one, when it comes to qualifications for the job, in my opinion, the most important qualification is understanding you're not qualified. So Moshe, when God gives Moshe his job to do, is he trying to explain why he doesn't want the job? Is he saying no, and here's why I don't want it? Or he's saying, I'd love to, but how can I do it? Is Moshe's reluctance coming from laziness, not wanting to take a challenge? Or is reluctance because he doesn't think he's the one for the job because he doesn't think he can do it? And all of his questions is Moshe trying to clarify how to get the job done. Now, from what you remember, is what happens at the burning bush. God speaks to Moshe. Does he give him information or does he give him a job? Is my question clear? Is God appearing to Moshe? When God appeared to our ancestors, sometimes he gives them a job, lech lecha.
Yeah.
Sometimes he gives them information, like Brit Ben Abtarim, here's what's going to happen, that you can do about it, but something you need to know.
I think he's giving him a job. I see him saying, lech va'asafta, go and gather the elders of the people. And go and tell them, God appeared to me.
But that's only after Moshe's question.
Okay, fine.
But what's the first thing God tells Moshe Rabbeinu? First, he identifies himself. By the way, Moshe Rabbeinu must be aware of the stories of Sefer, or the themes of Sefer Breshit, because he's heard of Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Yeah. He's aware of God's names, Elokim and Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. He's aware of God's name. He's aware of the covenants. It's clear. Because when God identifies himself, I'm the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
That's how we start Shemot Esrei. So our relationship with God is based on our previous understandings. Yeah. So Moshe has a Jewish education, that's for sure.
That you think that you got that from his mum, who was able to nurse him for the first couple of years of his life?
Yeah, I mean, what do you call it? He was from Shevet Levi.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think he was a prince in Egypt. I told you, I think last time, his Pharaoh's daughter was running an orphanage. She was rebelling against her father.
Oh, you reckon she was collecting lots of Jewish babies?
She's you ever seen a rebellious daughter who's not happy with her father's policies and tries to fix things? It's a classic human story. By the women are always the heroes in the story. Shifra and Pua, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, either way, there's this mean, evil Pharaoh doing these terrible decrees, and women are coming and saving the day. There's something, again, that's already a different theme, but you can't miss that in the story. And it's also individuals, standing up on both sides of the story. Now, first God identifies himself. What's the first thing he tells him? What you quoted. What's he tell Moshe in Pasuk Zayin? I saw.
Right. I've seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. And I
heard their
screaming
because of their oppressors.
Right. I know this.
And identify with their thing.
Right.
And then
I'm going down to save them from the hand of Egypt and bring them up from that land to a good land that's flowing with milk and honey.
So who's going to take us out of Egypt?
God says he
says, I heard the cry.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm coming down. I'm going to take him out of Egypt. Like he promised Yaakov. I'll take you down. I'll bring you back up.
Yeah.
So the first thing God tells Moshe is information. I heard the cry. Therefore, I'm coming to take him out of Egypt. And then God repeats himself and says, what in Pasuk Tet?
Then he says
the same thing again.
Yeah.
I hear the cry. And now in Pasuk Yud, and now you First God says,
send you to take
exactly. I heard the cry for I'm going to take them out, and then God says, I heard the cry for you take them out of Egypt. Now, if God told you go to Pharaoh and take him out of Egypt, and you haven't been there for decades, what would you do? Because if Moshe would say, okay, fine, and go, what would he do? Can anyone just go into Pharaoh's palace?
I don't know.
Definitely not an ex-con. So maybe, but not any Jew or anyone can come as the official leader of the Jewish people. Moshe can't come as an outsider and say, let my people go, or go free, whatever he's going to ask for, unless he's coming as an official leader. And therefore, Moshe's first question is, I'd love to do the job, but how can I do it? I'll follow the Rashbam here. He says, who might go to Pharaoh? Meaning, I'm not a leader. I'm a nobody. I can't go as a representative of the Jewish people.
Because
I'm not one of them.
Right. And neither is he a specific diplomat of
anybody
else.
Moshe, in order to go to Pharaoh, has to get his credentials first approved by the elders of Israel. Now, the elders of Israel, we know there's officers and there's a liaison between Pharaoh and the work output. We see that in the story later on. So the elders of Israel have political positions. They're the leaders, and they communicate with Pharaoh. But Moshe can't go to Pharaoh unless he's appointed by the elders.
Right.
So number one, he says, Moshe, who am I to go? And then he says, and let's say I go to Pharaoh. Now what do? Just say, let my people go? Why would he let them go? Moshe asking, how am I going to do it?
As in, like, Pharaoh would say, not just who's God, but who are you?
Yeah, who are you, number one? And who's this God, as he says later on, and who are you? And why should I let them go?
Right.
So Moshe is asking, doesn't say, I don't want the job, but what? He's saying, how can I do it?
Right.
And God gives him a great answer. God's answer is, that's not your problem. I'll be with you. Number one, it says, I'll be with you.
Yeah.
And the burning bush is the sign. But what I want to explain is, God is going to take us out of Egypt. God needs Moshe not to take them out of Egypt. God needs Moshe to run the plays. Meaning, God is I call it the head coach. God has the whole game strategy. I need someone to run the plays down here on the ground.
Right.
But it's not Moshe's job to take us out of Egypt. God's going to take us out of Egypt. We say this at the Seder. Remember,
right.
God took us out of Egypt. Moshe's job, we'll see later, is sort of run interference. Moshe's job will be to fail. Right? Because God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, what's your job? I'll get you in. Number one, I'll make you the leader of the people. I'll take care of that for you. That'll be in Perek Daled. But the first thing God tells Moshe is that, I'll get you there. I'll make you the leader. I'll make you the representative. And then I'm going to take him out of Egypt. I need someone going to Pharaoh to make up a story. You follow?
To make up a story.
And we'll see in a minute. Your job, we'll see later on, is not to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. The movies have it all wrong, in case you never noticed. Moshe never asked for freedom once. He never says, let my people go.
He doesn't ask for freedom at all.
Never once. Instead, that's another question. He doesn't say, let my people go and serve me. He says, send my people out to serve me. I don't need Pharaoh to give us permission to leave. I don't need Pharaoh to give us freedom. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a plan. What's the plan? You go to Pharaoh. I want you to demand Pharaoh to send your slaves out to serve me in the desert, a 3-day distance. Not for 3 days, a 3-day distance. That's like a week or so.
Right.
To serve me.
Right. Which is a big question. Like, why
lie when you don't need to?
Yeah, God could take him out and just and they'll be out.
Yeah.
They can ask for it if they like, but why make the trick of asking for a 3-day trip?
But the bigger question is, God tells Moshe, it's your job to go to Pharaoh, say, send my people out to serve me in the desert. And if not, there'll be these terrible plagues. Hopefully that will convince Pharaoh to send them out. And then God tells Moshe, that's your job. I'm going to make sure he says no. That's exactly what we're reading Perek Gimel.
Right.
What you were reading before.
Pharaoh won't listen.
There's the first thing God tells Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe tells Pharaoh, Moshe asks Pharaoh, how am I going to do it? God says, I'll take care of it. I'll be with you. And then he says, when you take him out of Egypt, turn me on the mountain. We'll go back to that. We'll follow Rashbam in a minute on that. Then Moshe asks, I'm going to come to the elders and they're going to ask me, what's God's name? Oh, he has, remember, is God's name Elokim or God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei? Meaning, is this the final redemption of Brit Ben Abtarim? Is this like, whoa, is this the big event we've been waiting for? Or is this God working through natural ways?
Interesting. You say that's what Moshe means.
Moshe wants to know. We're assuming Moshe knows God has 2 names and there's 2 covenants in Sefer Bereshit. God can take care of things through natural means, Shem Elokim, Brit Milah, or he can do this big miraculous redemption, punishing our oppressor with great wealth and with God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei. But that's maybe there's another couple hundred years until that happens. Is this going to be a short, small redemption just because things are so bad, or is this the big deal? Is this the big thing? That's what to prepare for. And God's answer is that follow the Rashbam says beautifully, God's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, my name is Yud Kei Vav Kei, meaning this is the final redemption. This is it. We've been waiting for this all these
It's almost like
years.
Moshe's asking, how's the redemption going to go? Is it going to be slow and steady, maybe with a guy with a long beard like Herzl coming in and leading a very 100 years political process or more, or is it going to be
the big
like
the
temple falling down from the skies, already built?
Which question we ask ourselves to this day.
Right. So that's the Jewish people's question that Moshe is preparing for when it says Ma Shemot.
And God will actually answer it in Parasha Be'era.
But then God doesn't answer Hashem or Elokim.
Oh, so Rashbam says means Yud Kei Vav Kei. But look in Pasuk Tet Zayin. What's God tell Moshe? Go gather the elders of Israel together. I'm sending you. Tell them God appeared to me. It's time for Pokot Pakarati.
Yeah, that's the key word.
Pokot Pakarati. We did that last week.
Yeah.
That's the last words Yosef, but that was Shem Elokim. Elokim told Yosef. Elokim told Yaakov to tell, and Yaakov tells Yosef, Elokim is going to remember you and take you out of Egypt. Tell you want to come back because you have to become a goy gadol.
Yeah.
So number one, but what he says, look in Pasuk Tet Zayin. Lech v'safta tziknei Yisrael, go gather the elders of Israel and tell them, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the God of Israel, appeared to me. Nirei Lai. What's he say? Pokot pakadi etchem. Where are we? You have it. I see what's happened to you in Egypt. That's your suffering.
Yeah.
And therefore, what's God say next? It's rhyme. That's Ben Abturim. I'm going to take you out of your suffering from Egypt. I'm going to take you out of your suffering from Egypt and bring you to the promised land.
Right.
The land I promised your fathers.
In other words, it's Elokim with the code Pakarati, and it's Hashem with the reference to
with the Ani. So you'll see, God will clarify that in Parasha Ve'era. Where he mentions both covenants. But God is going to take him out with both names, basically, but primarily B'Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Interesting. So you see like the Pakod Pakarati with the Shem Elokim and the Brit Be'er Matarim with Shem Hashem.
With Ani, but
as like two parallel tracks that could have sort of been options. It could have been
one step by step, but now it's all coming together.
Right. They're working together now.
That's exactly what God tells Moshe in Parasha Ve'era. I remembered. Again, we can do that next week, where God says, "I appeared to the Avot Bel Shaddai, v'gam hakiboti et briti itam." That's Brit Milah. V'gam shamati et nakap b'nei Yisrael v'mitzrayim abidim otam. That's called Briti. That'll be Brit Ben Abtarim. And then that leads to the 4 cups. Again, that requires a whole share.
Okay, so hold on a second. I've kind of lost a little bit of track of where we're going. We got why Moshe is so reluctant, because it's good to be reluctant, because he's
he wants to get the job done. He doesn't want to do a lot. He wants to do a good job. He asks really good questions.
Right.
How can I do it? And God says, here's what you're going to do. But it's not your job to get it done. Your job is to follow orders. I need a man on the ground to run the place.
Right. And God is the one with the
what
the
they call in Hebrew,
Moshe
a rosh katan, not a rosh gadol.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when God tells Yeshua to conquer the land, Yeshua has to make the battle plans. God can come and help here and there.
Yeah, let God worry about the big picture. Moshe is just doing.
You run the place, and we'll see later on. Moshe's job is to fail. This is what he tells him next. Okay, they'll listen to you.
Yeah.
That was who's going to listen to you? The elders. That you go and tell them.
Yeah.
They'll buy it, and then they'll accept your credentials, and then you come with the skenim to Pharaoh as a leader of the Jewish people, representing the Jewish people, and tell them what.
We want to go 3 days in the desert.
The God of the Ibrim.
Yeah.
We also have a God. We don't have a land, but we're just wandering people. We also have a God. We were called upon by that God to go serve him a 3-day distance into the desert to serve a God in the desert. Got it?
Right.
Now, that's Pasuk Yud. That's your job. Now, what seems to be the plan? I'll follow Rashbam here, and then we might argue with it. He says, how are we going to get them out of Egypt? Go tell Pharaoh we need to serve our God in the desert. Right. He might buy that. Now, Rashbam says he'll never buy freedom, but maybe religious freedom. He'll give us a week off to serve our God. And then once we're in the desert, what do? We'll go. No, we won't come back.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's Rashbam's approach. He says, notice, that's God's plan for the Exodus.
Pharaoh could have agreed to that, and then we would have just
he's
gone off into the desert for 3 days,
Yeah.
served God at Har Sinai, and then kept walking towards Israel.
Yeah. Basically, Rashbam says it's all a big hoax. What's
Yeah.
God's master plan? He'll never say yes to freedom,
Mhm.
but what? Maybe he'll say yes to religious freedom.
Yeah.
And therefore, go ask him permission. Let's go serve our God a 3-day distance in the desert. And then, what's the assumption? We won't come back. And that's God's answer to Moshe Rabbeinu, how to take them out. He says, when you take them out of Egypt, serve me on this mountain. That's not what to do when you get there, but rather how to get you out of Egypt. Go
Well-
tell Pharaoh we need to serve our God in the desert.
That doesn't explain why they would just lie about it.
Yeah,
to Pharaoh.
that's Rashbam's question. It's okay to lie? And God says, yeah. I mean, Rashbam says that's
Not-
what God does.
Not just
Because it's der chokhmah.
Okay, but it's not just about lying. It's also about, why is this strategy necessary for God? We're talking about God who's about to do all the plagues.
Yeah.
Why didn't he just, what does it matter if Pharaoh says yes or no? Like, why do we need to give Pharaoh like an easier option to let the Jews out? Let him have a hard option. Let him not
Okay.
let the Jews out. And let's do the plagues like we're anyway going to do.
No. So now I'm going to throw what do they call? Turn the whole story around.
Okay, go on.
I don't need to convince Pharaoh just to send them out. God's biggest problem is to get the Jews to leave. Hope I don't get in trouble for this.
Go
But
on.
I'm assuming that had Pharaoh given us permission to leave, especially knowing Jewish history, you can count on your fingers how many Jews would have left.
Ooh.
We've been living in Egypt for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
We're immersed in Egyptian cultures, we'll see. We see that from Yechezkel. Chazal say we're the 49th level of Tumah. We are not begging God we want freedom. We're begging God we're suffering. On the people's radar, they just want a lighter workload. That's all on their radar. We're not ready for redemption. It's not on the radar at all. How is God going to get an entire nation out of Egypt overnight with great wealth? You follow? That's mission impossible.
Oh,
You understand what God's problem is?
The
How do you
Jews
get the
and-
Jews out of Egypt? Who's going to do the dirty work? The Egyptian people. No, I need to convince Egypt to kick us out of Egypt.
Otherwise, we just wouldn't have left.
That's what Chumash says.
How does Chumash say that?
It's just read the story
Go on.
because that's how the Parasha ends. What happens?
Mhm.
Remember, it gets Moshe goes to Pharaoh and they double the workload.
Yeah.
And Moshe is aghast. What do you mean? And he says, you promised redemption, and I told you I'm not the guy for the job, right? I go and I failed. Remember? It says, Lama hara'ota lamazeh, at the end of chapter 5. Why'd you make things worse for them? And from the time I went to Pharaoh, only things got worse, not got better. Remember God's answer? The last line of the Parsha? You'll see what I'm going to do to Egypt. Moshe, you just wait and see.
Yeah.
It's not your job. I'm taking out of Egypt. You'll see what I'm going to do. Okay. Ki biyad chazaka, ata tireh, what else? You'll see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh. Ki biyad chazaka yishalchem, uviyad chazaka yigarshem yatzo. When I'm finished with this story, I got a master plan. As I say, Moshe's in the dark until Choshech, we'll see.
Okay.
Moshe doesn't know how many plagues there's going to be. He doesn't know what they're going to be. He doesn't know any of that in Pshat. Right? It's plague by plague.
Right.
Not plague, no, it's one plague at a time.
Mm-hmm.
God never tells Moshe there will be 10 plagues. Well, he only finds out about the last plague the day before the last plague. We'll see later on, after Choshech. But what needs to happen, I need to convince Pharaoh that it's in their interest that we leave Egypt. Now, listen, the key is, it's all in one pasuk in Parakeh. In Parakeh, when Moshe finally, first he has to do the signs for the elders to convince him to make him his leader. Remember, that's the 3 signs he gets to convince the leaders that God is really with them. And then Moshe says, I'm not a man of words. He says, God says, I know you're not a man of words. Don't worry, I got you covered. I've already sent. When God gets angry with Moshe for saying, I don't want to do it again, because I'm not a man of words, which is one of the best puns in Chumash. Lo ish devarim anochi, and then he writes Sefer Devarim later on. When God tells Moshe knows who gave man a mouth, etc., and then Moshe says, send whatever you want. God says, I got you covered. Aaron's already on his way. I know you don't know how to talk. He said, don't worry, Aaron's already on his way to meet you, and he's going to be your spokesperson, and you and Aaron will do it together. Mm-hmm. I got you. God says, I got it all covered. Just follow my plan. You follow?
Yeah.
Be what's called a Rosh Katan, like be a
small picture.
Yeah. See the swamp. Don't, you're not running the show. Let me make the decision. So first teach you in the army, follow orders. Right. You're not an officer yet. You're not a general. If every soldier, every private thinks he's a general, you don't win a war that way. God says, I need you to run the place. Yeah. Now, but the first thing God tells Moshe Rabbeinu to tell Pharaoh, we see in Parakeh. What happens? Moshe goes to Pharaoh and says, send my people out to serve me. Pharaoh says, never heard of this God. And then in Pasuk Gimel, this is the key to the whole story. Vayimru, The God of the Hebrews is called upon us. We need to go a 3-day distance into the desert to bring sacrifices to our God. If we don't bring these sacrifices, what will happen? We are going to be smitten by dever, which is like some medical sickness, like some type of plague or pandemic, or cherev, war, or sword. Meaning, if we don't serve our God, you're going to lose your soul. You're going to lose your servants. Or if we don't serve our God, you're going to get hurt. You follow? Right. Who's us in the story? So Rashi says, Moshe is saying in a nice way, if we don't serve our God, you're going to get smitten by dever and cherev. That's what happens. Yeah. Those are the two main. That's plague number 5 and plague number 10.
Yeah.
Dever and cherev. Now, how do I convince Pharaoh that it's in Egypt's interest that we serve our God in the desert? Okay, we'll have to discuss this next week in detail because it gets complicated. I'll just give you the framework. Moshe's job is to go to Pharaoh and say, if we don't serve our God in the desert, this punishment's going to happen. And Pharaoh says no, and the punishment comes, but it's not that long, it's only a week, okay? Mm-hmm. And they survive it, and then things get quiet again, and they don't change their mind. Every time Pharaoh says yes, and he says no, but God hardens his heart every time. Either he hardens his own heart, or God will harden his heart. The bottom line, the warning doesn't work. But I got to build up the tension. Next plague, send my people out and serve me, otherwise this plague will happen. After 7 plagues, beginning of Parasha Bo, and before the 8th plague, before Abed, in chapter 10, verse 7, Pharaoh's government, Pharaoh's ministers, his advisors, Abdei Paro tell him, Ad matai, how long are you going to let this people, these plagues, send them out and let them serve their God? We're all going to be wiped out. Okay? And Pharaoh says, okay, go, but only the men, and then they have all these negotiations. But everyone in Egypt is convinced, except for Pharaoh, until the 10th plague, that it's in Egypt's interest that we serve our God. Because what's going to save Egypt from all these consecutive plagues getting worse and worse? Remember, every couple of weeks, every couple of months, there's another plague. What's the reason for it? We need a correlation. Remember causation, correlation? So this thing of correlation is a causation. Remember that from the old Corona days? I need to convince the cause of the plagues. The Jews have to serve their God, and that'll stop all these disastrous things happening to Egypt. Mm-hmm. Now, what are they afraid of? That we'll talk about. That's the question. Are they afraid they're not going to come back, or they will come back? That we'll see. But it's going to take 10 plagues to convince all of Egypt, not just Pharaoh, all of Egypt, that it's in Egypt's interest that we go serve our God in the desert. Now, in preparation for that big moment called the 10th plague, God is going to command his people, everyone, to be at home, to bring a sacrifice to their God before the plague of the firstborn. On the day of the night of that plague, the day before, all of Egypt sees the Jewish people bringing that sacrifice. And what do they see? What houses were safe from the plague? Any house that brought the sacrifice. What's that proof to the Egyptian people? The Jewish sacrifice can stop a plague. Right. And that night, when the plague of the firstborn happens, and who's saved? Any home that had a sacrifice, what's all of Egypt convinced of? Jewish sacrifice works. Mm-hmm. It explains Korban Pesach beautifully. Right. There'll be many reasons for Pesach, but that's going to be the main one. And then we're forced out of Egypt. By Chazek knows the Egyptians kick us out. We're in such a rush that we don't have time to bake our bread.
Because the Egyptians were so
rushing us out
for us to leave.
Remember your Seder, you point to the matzah and say Shema? Okay? Right. Because why? That's why. Because what's it say? We took the dough and ran. We took the dough with us. We didn't have time to bake it. Ki gorshume Mitzrayim. We were expelled from Egypt. And we didn't have time to bake bread. And we had nothing else ready. We were caught by surprise. So God had everyone accounted for. Everyone's home, well dressed, all set. God's got this amazing master plan. But we're expecting to be in our houses all night long. We're told, don't leave your house, till morning. And in the middle of the night, we get thrown out by the Egyptians. Now, they are it's so urgent to them for us to leave.
Because they're all dying, and they're like, oh my gosh, the Jewish sacrifice can stop this plague. The plague is running rampant, and we've got to get them out and do their sacrifice. Otherwise...
And then God tells the people, I left to serve my God. I have nothing to wear. I need some jewelry. It's not nice to go to shul without nice clothes and nice jewelry and things that everyone else has.
Right.
And we can borrow anything we want. Mm-hmm. Why is Egypt so eager to lend us whatever we want? Because we're saving their country.
They want us to stop the plague.
They're going to give us even arms to protect ourselves in the desert. We'll see later on.
Okay, so hold on. So this all comes back to the idea of the 3 days in the desert plan. And that the point of going with that strategy is that we want the Egyptians to push us out not only for us to be able to leave, because if we'd just been able to leave, we wouldn't have left.
And maybe not everybody. Maybe,
Right.
for sure not everybody overnight right away.
Right.
And not with great wealth.
Right. We
It's a
want
beautiful midrash. You fulfilled Vavdu V'Notam.
Mhm.
You kept Riben Tarim, the suffering. You promised Rechush Gadol. You promised great wealth. And be machmer on that as well.
yeah.
Now, what'll make it legal, we'll see. As we're only borrowing, we have to return it, right?
Right.
Well, we'll see. Once they declare war against us, that's what'll be.
Mhm.
No, after they declare war, we don't have to return it. That's already. That'll legalize our robbing the cash register. But that's God's plan. We'll end with that. Listen what God tells Moshe Rabbeinu at the burning bush.
Yep.
After you listen to you. You go to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And Pasuk Yitchet and tell them, God
In
appeared
Gimel,
to me, and we have to go serve God 3 days in the desert. Okay? And then Pasuk Yutet, V'ani yadati ki lo yitein etchem melech Mitzrayim lahaloch v'lo b'yad chazaka. I know he's going to say no. You go and tell him, send us out. I want him to say no, and except he's not going to throw you out with the yad chazaka. Not yet. Okay? Then v'shalachti tedi v'keit et Mitzrayim b'chol niflota b'shar sebekibbo v'achrein nishalach etchem. Then I'll bring plague by plague as many as I need, and then he'll send you out. Okay?
And he will send you out. He won't let you go. He'll
send you out.
Yeah.
And then next 2 lines. V'natati lev etchena hamas b'nei Mitzrayim. I'll make them like you because you're helping the Egyptians. They want you to leave more than you want to leave.
Right.
And therefore, when you go, you won't go empty-handed. And then everyone should ask their neighbors, oh, I need to borrow this, I need to borrow that. And they'll lend you whatever you want and take advantage of that. And now get the Rechush Gadol. That's God's master plan.
Amazing.
But that's God telling Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm taking him out of Egypt. I got a master plan. I'm going to cover everything. You don't understand it until it happens. Mm-hmm. And there's more to come, we'll see. Everything's going to change at the last minute. But all through the story, Moshe's job is just to listen to God and run the plays.
Yeah.
And that'll explain. That's why the burning bush narrative, Moshe's questions are right on the mark. And God said, Moshe Rabbeinu, I don't need a leader. I need a follower in the meantime. Right. What'll make Moshe a leader? That'll happen later on. But Moshe's job is to run the place and to fail. I call him the first shul rabbi. Your job is to give a sermon every week. No one's going to listen, but that's your job. No, you tell Pharaoh, send my people out. He's going to say no. I know he's going to say no, but that's why you're hired.
Excellent. Okay. Well, may we also experience the full redemption once again.
And be worthy of leaders like Moshe Rabbeinu.
Amen. Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.